Hi, I'm Emma. 3 weeks ago, I received a text message that changed everything. Hey, this isn't working out. I think we should see other people. Take care. 27 words. 2 years of my life reduced to a casual goodbye you'd send to a pizza delivery guy. But here's the thing about underestimating someone. Sometimes they come back to show you exactly who you were sleeping next to. And when Jake saw me walk into that boardroom last Tuesday, signing papers that would reshape his entire company's future, his face went whiter than fresh snow on the Rockies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Denver morning air still carried that sharp bite of early October when I walked into TechFlow Solutions that Wednesday, 3 weeks after the text heard around my world. The building smelled like coffee and ambition, 23 floors of glass and steel where I'd spent the last 4 years building something that mattered. My heels echoed against the polished concrete floors of the lobby, each step a small declaration that I was still here, still standing, still moving forward despite everything. I adjusted the strap of my laptop bag and nodded to Marcus, the security guard who'd been greeting me with the same warm smile since I was a junior developer fresh out of Colorado State. He didn't know about the text. He didn't know that 3 weeks ago, my entire world had tilted sideways while I was sitting in my apartment, wearing Jake's old University of Denver sweatshirt, eating leftover Thai food, and debugging code for a client presentation. The elevator hummed as it carried me to the 15th floor, where the advanced systems development team lived and breathed innovation. Through the glass doors, I could see the familiar chaos of my department. Developers hunched over dual monitors, product managers gesticulating wildly during stand-up meetings, and the gentle hum of creativity mixed with caffeine addiction that had become the soundtrack of my professional life. Sarah Chen looked up from her desk as I passed, her dark eyes immediately scanning my face with the precision of someone who'd known me since our intern days. She'd been the first person I'd called after receiving Jake's text, and she'd driven, over with wine and tissues without asking a single question. That's the kind of friend who earns your loyalty for life. "Morning, warrior," she said quietly, using the nickname she'd given me after watching me present to a room full of skeptical executives who thought a 26-year-old woman couldn't possibly understand enterprise software architecture. I'd proven them wrong that day, just like I'd been proving people wrong my entire career. "Morning," I replied, managing a smile that felt more genuine than it had in weeks. Work had become my sanctuary, the one place where Jake's sudden absence didn't echo in every corner. Here, I was Emma Rodriguez, senior software architect, the woman who'd developed the client management system that was currently revolutionizing how mid-size companies handled their customer relationships. Here, I wasn't the girl who got dumped via text message by someone she'd been planning a future with. I settled into my desk, a corner spot I'd claimed 2 years ago when they promoted me to senior level. The window looked out over downtown Denver, where the mountains created a dramatic backdrop against the morning sky. On clear days, you could see all the way to the Continental Divide, a reminder that there were bigger things in this world than whatever personal drama might be consuming your thoughts. My computer hummed to life, and immediately my inbox flooded with notifications. 53 new emails since yesterday evening, most of them related to the Harrison Industries project that was supposed to launch next month. Harrison Industries, the name that had become both my professional triumph and personal nightmare, though I was the only one who knew about the nightmare part. The irony wasn't lost on me. Harrison Industries was Jake's biggest client at his marketing firm, Harrison & Associates. They shared more than just a name. Robert Harrison, the CEO, had started the consulting company as a side venture before. His main business took off. Jake had been working on their rebranding campaign for months, taking conference calls that interrupted our dinners and weekend plans, always emphasizing how this account could make his career. What Jake didn't know was that I'd been working on something that would impact Harrison Industries far more significantly than any marketing campaign ever could. The client management system I developed wasn't just another software solution. It was a complete paradigm shift for how companies could track, analyze, and optimize their customer relationships. And Harrison Industries wasn't just interested in licensing it. They wanted to acquire the entire technology and integrate it into their core business model. The first email in my inbox was from Dr. Patricia Williams, my former professor who'd become an unofficial mentor and the business advisor I trusted most. Her message was characteristically direct. Emma, the Harrison Industries meeting is confirmed for next Tuesday. Board presentation at 2 p.m. Are you ready to change your life? I stared at the screen for a long moment, remembering the phone call I'd made to Dr. Williams the day after Jake's text arrived. I'd been crying, something I rarely did, and feeling like my personal and professional worlds were colliding in the messiest possible way. She'd listened without judgment as I explained the situation, then asked one simple question that had reframed everything. Emma, are you going to let someone else's inability to see your worth determine your worth? That question had sparked something inside me, a reminder of who I'd been before Jake Thompson entered my life, and somehow convinced me that I needed his validation to feel complete. I'd been Emma Rodriguez long before I became Jake's girlfriend, and I'd be Emma Rodriguez long after his memory faded into irrelevance. The Harrison Industries project had been in development for 8 months, long before Jake and I started having problems, long before I noticed him staying late at the office more frequently, long before Madison Clark's name started appearing in his conversations with suspicious regularity. Madison worked at his company, handling social media for their clients, and she had the kind of effortless blonde beauty that made other women feel invisible by comparison. I'd met Madison twice at company events, and both times she'd been perfectly pleasant, asking intelligent questions about my work and complimenting my dress with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. It wasn't until after the breakup that Sarah helped me piece together the timeline, how Madison had joined Harrison and Associates 4 months ago, how Jake's behavior had shifted around the same time, how he'd started mentioning her insights during our conversations about his work. The betrayal stung, but what hurt more was the casualness of it all. 2 years of shared meals, weekend hiking trips in the Rockies, conversations about moving in together, meeting each other's families, all reduced to a text message sent while I was debugging code on a Tuesday night. No conversation, no explanation, no acknowledgement that what we'd shared deserved more than a digital dismissal. But here's what Jake didn't understand about me. I'd built my entire career on turning problems into solutions. Every coding challenge, that had seemed impossible. Every client demand that appeared unrealistic. Every moment when colleagues doubted my capabilities, I'd transformed all of it into fuel for innovation. His text message was just another problem to solve, another challenge to overcome. My phone buzzed with a message from Alex Chen, the intellectual property lawyer who'd been helping me navigate the Harrison Industries acquisition. We'd met through Dr. Williams, and his reputation for protecting tech innovators was legendary in Denver's startup community. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His text was brief. Contract revisions complete. You own everything, Emma. They can't touch what you've built. That message carried more weight than Jake's entire relationship with me. For months, I'd been worried about the intellectual property implications of dating someone who worked with Harrison Industries. I'd consulted with Alex early in the process, making sure every piece of code I wrote, every innovation I developed, was clearly documented as my individual work, created on my own time with my own resources. The paranoia had seemed excessive at the time, but now it felt like the smartest decision I'd ever made. The morning flew by in a blur of code reviews and client calls. The Harrison Industries system was performing flawlessly in beta testing, exceeding every benchmark we'd established for user engagement and operational efficiency. Companies that implemented it were seeing customer satisfaction scores increase by an average of 37% within the first quarter, while reducing administrative overhead by nearly half. It wasn't just software, it was a revolution in how businesses could understand and serve their customers. Around noon, Sarah appeared at my desk with 2 cups of coffee and the expression she wore when she had news to share. "Spill it," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Tyler Morrison just posted on LinkedIn," she said, referring to one of Jake's closest friends from college. "Big celebration at Harrison and Associates last night. Apparently they landed some major new client, and Jake got promoted to senior account manager." I felt a small twist in my stomach, but it wasn't jealousy. It was something closer to pity. Jake was celebrating career advancement at the exact moment when his world was about to shift in ways he couldn't imagine. In exactly 1 week, I'd be sitting across from his company's most important client, signing papers that would change the trajectory of both our professional lives forever. "How are you feeling about next Tuesday?" Sarah asked, reading my expression, with the accuracy of someone who'd known me through every major milestone of my adult life. "Terrified," I admitted. "Excited, vindicated, confused, all at the same time." "That sounds about right for rewriting your entire future in a single meeting." The afternoon brought a call from Robert Harrison himself, something that still felt surreal despite our months of collaboration. His voice carried the confidence of someone who'd built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch, but he spoke to me with the respect reserved for equals, not subordinates. "Emma, I've been reviewing the latest performance metrics from the beta test," he said without preamble. "These numbers are unprecedented. My board is prepared to move forward with the full acquisition offer we discussed." "I'm ready, Mr. Harrison." "Good. And Emma, what you've created here, it's not just software. It's the future of customer relationship management. I hope you understand the magnitude of what you've accomplished." After the call ended, I sat in silence for several minutes, staring out at the Denver skyline. 6 months ago, I'd been a talented but relatively unknown senior developer, dating a marketing guy who seemed charmed by my technical skills, but never quite understood their significance. Today, I was on the verge of a deal that would establish me as one of the most innovative minds in enterprise software development. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been built through years of late nights, weekend coding sessions, rejected proposals that I'd refined and resubmitted, and countless moments when I'd chosen to trust my instincts over other people's limitations. Jake's text hadn't created this opportunity. It had simply cleared away the distractions that were preventing me from seeing it clearly. As the day wound down, I found myself thinking about the last conversation Jake and I had before everything fell apart. We'd been at dinner at our favorite restaurant in Lodo, and I'd been excited to tell him about the preliminary interest from Harrison Industries. But Jake had been distracted, checking his phone repeatedly and offering half-hearted responses to my enthusiasm. "That's great, Em," he'd said, not looking up from his screen. "Really impressive stuff." The dismissiveness in his tone had stung more than I'd admitted at the time. Here I was, sharing potentially life-changing news with the person I loved most, and he couldn't be bothered to put down his phone for 5 minutes. I'd brushed off the hurt, telling myself he was just stressed about work, but looking back, that moment had been a preview of the text message that would arrive 2 weeks later. That evening, I drove home to my apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. A cozy one-bedroom place I'd decorated with plants, bookshelves, and the kind of art you find at local galleries rather than furniture stores. It was entirely mine, filled with reminders of who I'd been before Jake and who I was becoming after him. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch with my laptop, reviewing the presentation I'd give to the Harrison Industries board next Tuesday. Every slide represented months of work, countless iterations, and a vision for technology that could transform how businesses operated. This wasn't just about getting back at an ex-boyfriend. It was about claiming recognition for work that deserved recognition, regardless of any personal drama. but I'd be lying if I said the timing wasn't poetic. Jake had dismissed me with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never bothered to understand what he was losing. Next week, he'd learn exactly what that loss looked like in real, tangible terms. Not because I'd sought revenge, but because I'd never stopped building, creating, and pushing forward, even when someone I trusted had decided I wasn't worth a proper goodbye. My phone rang as I was reviewing the contract terms one final time. Dr. Williams's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with a smile I could hear in my own voice. "How are you feeling about next week?" she asked, "like I'm about to step into the rest of my life." "Good. That's exactly what you're doing." "Emma, I want you to remember something when you walk into that boardroom. You're not there because of what someone else did to you. You're there because of what you built, what you created, what you innovated. That text message was just noise. This deal is your signal." After we hung up, I walked to my bedroom window and looked out at the Denver lights stretching toward the mountains. Somewhere in this city, Jake was probably having dinner with Madison, celebrating his promotion, planning their future together, completely unaware that his world was about to intersect with mine in ways he'd never anticipated. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt powerful. There's a difference between seeking revenge and simply allowing truth to unfold on its own timeline. Next Tuesday, I'd walk into that boardroom as Emma Rodriguez, innovative software architect and soon-to-be business owner. Jake's presence in the story had become incidental, a footnote in a much larger narrative about talent, perseverance, and the dangerous game of underestimating someone who spent their entire career proving people wrong. The woman who'd received that text message 3 weeks ago had been heartbroken and confused. The woman preparing for next Tuesday's meeting was something else entirely. Focused, determined, and finally ready to claim credit for everything she'd built while someone else was busy taking her for granted. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more preparation, and the final countdown to a moment that would redefine my professional life. But tonight, I was content to sit with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best response to dismissal is simply continuing to excel at such a high level that dismissal becomes impossible. Jake had ended our relationship with 27 words sent from his phone. Next Tuesday, I'd respond with a signature on a contract that would speak volumes about who had really been the valuable one in our partnership. And for the first time since receiving that text, I found myself genuinely excited about what came next. The weekend before my Harrison Industries presentation, I decided to treat myself to brunch at Riverside Coffee House, a trendy spot in the Highlands where I could review my notes while watching the South Platte River flow past the windows. I'd chosen a corner table with my laptop open, presentation slides scattered across the surface alongside my avocado toast and lavender latte, when I heard it. "Emma? Oh my God, Emma Rodriguez!" I looked up to see Madison Clark approaching my table with the kind of enthusiastic wave people give when they're genuinely excited to see you. She wore a flowing sundress despite the October chill, her blonde hair perfectly styled in beachy waves that probably took an hour to achieve, but looked effortlessly natural. Behind her, trailing by about 3 steps and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in Colorado, was Jake. My stomach performed a small gymnastics routine, but I kept my expression neutral. "Hi, Madison. Jake." Madison slid into the empty chair across from me without invitation, her energy radiating the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. "I was just telling Jake we should come over and say hi. We saw you from across the room and I said, 'There's Emma. We have to go talk to her.'" She gestured toward Jake, who remained standing with his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. "How have you been?" Jake asked, his voice carrying the forced casualness of someone trying very hard to appear unaffected. He looked good, I had to admit. The autumn air had brought out the color in his cheeks, and he was wearing the navy sweater. I'd bought him for his birthday last year. The sight of it sent a small pang through my chest, quickly replaced by irritation at my own reaction. "I've been incredible," I said. and realized I meant it. Work is amazing. Life is good. Really? Good, actually. Madison's eyes lit up with what seemed like genuine interest. That's so wonderful to hear. Jake mentioned you work in tech. That must be so exciting. It is, I replied, glancing at Jake. His jaw was slightly clenched, a tell I recognized from our relationship whenever he felt uncomfortable. I develop enterprise software solutions, client management systems, specifically. That sounds so smart and complicated, Madison gushed. I barely understand the social media platforms. I manage for work, let alone actual software development. There was something in her tone that made me look more closely at her expression. The enthusiasm seemed genuine, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. Jake shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly wanting this interaction to end. We should probably get going, he said, placing a hand on Madison's shoulder. We have brunch reservations. Actually, Madison said, ignoring his suggestion entirely, I'd love to hear more about what you do. Jake's always talking about how brilliant you are. I raised an eyebrow, looking directly at Jake. Is he now? The color in Jake's cheeks deepened, and he looked away toward the river. Madison, we really should go. But Madison was either oblivious to his discomfort or choosing to ignore it. He showed me some of the presentations you helped him with for the Harrison account. Your technical insights were so impressive. The world seemed to slow down around me. I'm sorry, what presentations? The ones you consulted on, Madison continued brightly. Jake said you gave him all sorts of ideas about customer relationship, management, and data integration that really impressed Robert Harrison. I felt something cold settle in my chest, spreading outward like ice water through my veins. Jake, what is she talking about? Now Jake looked genuinely panicked. His eyes darted between Madison and me, and I could practically see him calculating damage control strategies. It's not, I just mentioned some conversations we'd had about software and customer management. Conversations, I repeated slowly. Madison, apparently beginning to sense the tension she'd created, looked between us with growing confusion. Oh no, did I say something wrong? I thought Emma knew about the consulting work. There was no consulting work, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the growing storm inside my chest. Jake, what exactly did you tell Harrison Industries about me? The silence stretched between us like a live wire. Jake's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, and Madison's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching. Horror, as she realized she'd just dropped a bomb into what she'd assumed was a friendly encounter. I need to go to the bathroom, Madison announced abruptly, standing so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. She disappeared toward the back of the coffee shop, leaving Jake and me alone at the table. Emma, I can explain, Jake started, but I held up a hand to stop him. You used my ideas in your presentations to Harrison Industries, I said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't like that. We had conversations about your work, and I just incorporated some of those insights into my campaign strategy. It's not like I stole anything. You incorporated my insights, I repeated, testing the words. My expertise about customer relationship management, which happens to be exactly what I've been developing professionally for the past 2 years. Jake's face was now fully flushed, and sweat had appeared along his hairline despite the cool morning air. You're making this sound worse than it is. All couples share ideas about work. It's not stealing. Did you tell Robert Harrison that these insights came from me? Silence. Did you give me credit for any of the technical strategies you presented to your biggest client? More silence. Did you even tell them that you were dating a software architect who specializes in exactly the kind of systems they need? Jake's shoulders sagged. Emma, you have to understand. This account is huge for my career. I couldn't afford to look like I wasn't the expert they hired. The admission hit me like a physical blow, not just that he'd used my ideas without credit, but that he'd actively concealed my expertise to protect his own image. I thought about all the nights he'd come home frustrated with technical challenges in his Harrison Industries campaign, how I'd patiently explained database structures and integration protocols, how I'd sketched out user experience flows on napkins during dinner. I'd thought I was helping my boyfriend. He'd thought he was gathering intel from an unpaid consultant. "You made me complicit in deceiving your client," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You let me help you while knowing you'd never acknowledge my contribution." It wasn't deception. It was strategic presentation of information. I stared at him, this man I'd shared 2 years of my life with, and realized I was looking at a stranger. The Jake I'd fallen in love with had been ambitious but ethical, driven but honest. This person sitting across from me was someone who'd calculated the value of my expertise against the risk to his reputation, and decided my contributions were worth stealing, but not worth crediting. Madison returned from the bathroom, her earlier enthusiasm replaced by careful caution. She could clearly sense the shift in atmosphere, the way conversations change when uncomfortable truths have been excavated. "Maybe we should all just, have a nice morning," she suggested weakly. "Actually," I said, standing and beginning to gather my laptop and papers, "I think this has been incredibly educational. Jake, thank you for clarifying your approach to collaboration. Madison, it was enlightening to meet you." I was halfway to the door when Jake caught up with me, his hand landing on my arm. "Emma, wait. Can we talk about this privately?" I turned to face him, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the person I'd once cared about. But it was overshadowed by everything I now understood about how he'd viewed our relationship, how he'd categorized my value in his life. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You've made your choices very clear. This doesn't have to change. Anything between us." I almost laughed. "Jake, there is no us. You ended that 3 weeks ago with a text message, remember? This just helps me understand why." I left him standing on the sidewalk outside Riverside Coffee House, Madison, hovering uncertainly behind him, both of them looking like actors who'd forgotten their lines. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing through implications I was only beginning to process. Back in my apartment, I immediately called Alex Chen. When he answered, I could hear the sound of weekend family chaos in the background, but his voice sharpened when he heard my tone. "Emma, what's wrong?" I explained the coffee shop encounter, Jake's admission about using my insights, the way he'd presented himself as the sole source of technical expertise to Harrison Industries. Alex listened without interruption, and I could practically hear him taking notes. "This is actually very good news for you," he said when I finished. "How is any of this good news?" "Because it establishes a clear pattern of Jake misrepresenting technical expertise to Harrison Industries. When you present your actual system to them next week, there's going to be an obvious contrast between real innovation and borrowed talking points. But what if they think I'm the one borrowing ideas? What if they assume Jake developed these concepts first? Emma, you have 18 months of documented development work, beta testing results, and intellectual property filings that predate Jake's involvement with Harrison Industries by 6 months. Your code is copyrighted, your system is patented, and your innovation is thoroughly documented. Jake has PowerPoint slides with insights he borrowed from dinner conversations. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. So his theft actually helps establish my credibility. More than that, it demonstrates that your expertise is so valuable that experienced marketing professionals are willing to risk their reputations to claim it as their own. When Harrison Industries sees the real system next week, they'll understand exactly what they've been hearing secondhand. After we hung up, I spent the rest of Saturday diving deeper into research about Jake's presentations to Harrison Industries. Social media posts from Harrison and Associates events showed Jake presenting to groups of executives, standing confidently in front of slides that discussed customer data integration strategies I'd explained to him over Thai takeout. LinkedIn. Posts from the company praised his innovative approach to client relationship optimization, terminology I'd taught him during weekend conversations he'd apparently considered professional development sessions. The more I discovered, the more I understood the scope of what he'd done. This wasn't casual idea sharing between partners. This was systematic appropriation of technical expertise, presented in a way that positioned him as an innovator rather than someone who'd had access to actual innovation through his personal relationship. Sunday brought a call from Dr. Williams, who'd somehow sensed that I needed guidance without my having to ask for it. Her intuition about her former students had always been uncanny. "Emma, how are you feeling about Tuesday's presentation?" "Confident about the work, complicated about everything else," I admitted, then told her about the coffee shop encounter and its implications. Dr. Williams was quiet for a long moment. "Emma, I want you to listen to me carefully. What Jake did was unethical, unprofessional, and probably actionable from a legal standpoint. But it's also irrelevant to your success." "How is it irrelevant?" "Because your value doesn't diminish when someone else tries to claim credit for it. If anything, the fact that your ideas were compelling enough for Jake to risk his reputation borrowing them just proves how exceptional your work really is." I hadn't thought about it that way. "Tuesday isn't about Jake," Dr. Williams continued. "It's about you presenting work that's going to change how businesses operate. Don't let someone else's dishonesty distract you from your moment of professional triumph." That evening, I did something I hadn't done since receiving Jake's breakup: text. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of his betrayal, not just the romantic abandonment, but the professional disrespect. I cried for the version of him I'd believed in, the person who I'd thought valued my mind as much as my heart. I grieved for the trust I'd given someone who'd cataloged my expertise like inventory he could use when convenient. But I also felt something else emerging from underneath the hurt. It was a fierce, clean anger that had nothing to do with romantic rejection and everything to do with professional dignity. Jake had underestimated me in every possible way. He'd assumed I'd never discover his appropriation of my ideas. He'd assumed my work wasn't significant enough to merit proper credit. He'd assumed that breaking up with me meant he could continue benefiting from my expertise without consequences. Tuesday would prove him wrong on every count. I spent Monday in final preparation mode, reviewing every aspect of my presentation with the intensity of someone preparing for the most important meeting of their career, which is exactly what it was. Sarah brought me lunch at my desk and found me surrounded by printed copies of technical specifications, market analysis reports, and beta testing results. "You're going to be incredible tomorrow," she said, settling into the chair beside my desk. "I'm going to be professional," I corrected. Incredible would imply this is about impressing people. This is about claiming recognition for work that deserves recognition. "And if Jake happens to be in the room when you do it?" I looked up from my papers and smiled. "Then Jake will learn something about the difference between borrowing ideas and actually creating them." That night, I laid out my clothes for the meeting, choosing a charcoal gray suit that conveyed authority without trying too hard, paired with the silver necklace my mother had given me for graduation. I wanted to look like exactly what I was: a serious professional presenting serious work to serious people. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, conditioned by 2 years of relationship patterns to expect communication from Jake. But the message was from Alex Chen. "Emma, you're about to change your life tomorrow. Own every moment of it." I fell asleep, thinking about the moment when Harrison Industries would see my actual system in action, when they'd understand the difference between recycled talking points and genuine innovation. Jake had spent months presenting borrowed insights about customer relationship management. Tomorrow, I'd show them what customer relationship management actually looked like when built by someone who understood both the technology and the vision behind it. The irony was almost poetic. Jake had ended our relationship via text, assuming he could discard me as easily as deleting a contact from his phone. But he'd never considered that discarding someone doesn't erase their value. It just removes your access to it. Tomorrow, Harrison Industries would gain access to everything Jake had lost, and he'd finally understand the true cost of underestimating someone who'd spent their entire career turning potential into achievement. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply allowing the consequences of his choices to unfold naturally, while the consequences of my choices, 2 years of development work, countless hours of innovation, and the persistence to turn vision into reality, finally received the recognition they'd always deserved. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Denver air that makes everything feel possible. I woke up naturally at 5:30, my body apparently deciding that sleep was less important than mental preparation for the day that would reshape my entire professional trajectory. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant hum of early morning traffic, and I took my time with my routine, moving through each step with deliberate intention. The shower water was exactly the right temperature, the coffee brewed to perfect strength, my makeup applied with the precision of someone who understood that confidence starts with the details you control. By 7:15, I was dressed in my charcoal suit, silver necklace catching the morning light streaming through my bedroom window. I looked in the full-length mirror and saw exactly what I wanted to see: a woman ready to claim her place in rooms where decisions get made. The drive to Harrison Industries headquarters took me through downtown Denver, past the familiar landmarks that had become the backdrop of my adult life. The building itself was impressive without being ostentatious: 30 floors of glass and steel that housed one of Colorado's most innovative companies. I'd researched every aspect of Harrison Industries over the past months, not just for the business opportunity, but because I believed in what they were building. Robert Harrison had started the company 15 years ago with a simple premise: businesses succeed when they understand their customers better than their competitors do. What began as a consulting firm had evolved into a technology-forward enterprise that helped mid-size companies optimize every aspect of their customer relationships. My software system wasn't just compatible with their vision. It was the next evolutionary step in their mission. I parked in the visitor section of the underground garage and took the elevator to the 28th floor, where Harrison Industries housed their executive offices and primary conference rooms. The receptionist, a professional woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and an efficient manner, greeted me with the warmth reserved for expected guests rather than random visitors. "Ms. Rodriguez, welcome to Harrison Industries. Mr. Harrison and the board are looking forward to your presentation. Can I offer you coffee or water before we begin?" "Coffee would be perfect, thank you." She led me to a smaller conference room adjacent to the main boardroom, a comfortable space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rocky Mountains. "You can set up your materials here. The presentation will begin at 2 o'clock sharp, and you'll have the room for 90 minutes, including questions and discussion." I spent the next hour arranging my laptop, testing the projection system, and reviewing my notes one final time. The presentation was organized into 4 distinct sections: the technical innovation behind my system, the market opportunity it addressed, the competitive advantages it provided, and the implementation timeline for full integration with Harrison Industries' existing infrastructure. But beyond the business case, I'd prepared something else: a demonstration of the system in real time, using actual data from companies that had participated in beta testing. Numbers don't lie, and I wanted the board to see exactly how my software transformed customer relationship management from theoretical strategy into measurable results. At 1:45, Robert Harrison himself appeared in the doorway. He was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-40s, with the kind of focused energy that comes from building something meaningful from nothing. His handshake was firm, his eye contact direct, and his smile genuine rather than performative. Emma, I've been looking forward to this meeting for weeks. The preliminary reports from your beta testing are extraordinary. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm excited to show you what we've built. Before we begin, he said, settling into a chair near the front of the room, I want you to know that this presentation is more than just a business pitch for us. We've been searching for technology that could fundamentally change how we serve our clients. If your system delivers what the early data suggests, this partnership could define the next decade of growth for both our companies. Other board members began filtering into the room, 7 executives representing different aspects of Harrison Industries' operations. I recognized several faces from my research. Patricia Liu, the Chief Technology Officer who'd started her career as a software developer before transitioning into leadership. Marcus Thompson, the Chief Financial Officer whose analysis would ultimately determine the financial viability of any acquisition. And David Chen, the Chief Operations Officer responsible for implementing any new systems across the company's existing infrastructure. At exactly 2 o'clock, I stood at the front of the room and began my presentation. The opening slides established the context. Customer relationship management was the most critical and least optimized aspect of modern business operations. Companies were drowning in customer data, while simultaneously failing to understand what that data meant for strategic decision-making. Traditional CRM systems collect information, I explained, advancing to a slide that showed conventional software interfaces. But collection without analysis is just expensive data storage. What businesses need is intelligence, systems that don't just track customer interactions, but predict customer needs, identify optimization opportunities, and automatically adjust strategies based on real-time feedback. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a side-by-side comparison of customer satisfaction scores before and after implementing my system. The results were dramatic. Companies saw average improvements of 37% in customer satisfaction within the first quarter, with some organizations achieving gains of over 50%. These aren't theoretical projections, I continued. These are actual results from companies that have been using the system for the past 8 months. Patricia Liu leaned forward in her seat. Emma, can you walk us through the technical architecture? How does your system integrate with existing databases and communication platforms? This was the question I'd been hoping for, the opportunity to demonstrate not just what my system accomplished, but how it accomplished it. I advanced to a series of technical diagrams that showed the software's underlying structure, explaining how artificial intelligence algorithms analyzed customer communication patterns, purchasing behaviors, and engagement metrics to create predictive models for each client relationship. The system doesn't replace human decision-making, I explained. It enhances human intelligence by providing insights that would be impossible to generate manually. A customer service representative using this system knows not just what a customer has purchased, but what they're likely to need next, when they're most likely to be receptive to outreach, and which communication channels will be most effective for each individual relationship. Marcus Thompson raised his hand. The ROI projections in your preliminary report are impressive, but they seem almost too good to be true. Can you break down the cost-benefit analysis in more detail? I'd anticipated this question as well. The next section of my presentation focused entirely on financial impact, with detailed breakdowns of implementation costs, training requirements, and projected revenue increases. I showed how companies using my system had reduced customer acquisition costs by an average of 28%, while increasing customer lifetime value by 42%. The initial investment is significant, I acknowledged, but the payback period averages 18 months, and the long-term financial impact compounds over time as the system learns and optimizes based on accumulated data. David Chen asked about implementation timelines, integration challenges, and staff training requirements. Each question allowed me to demonstrate deeper layers of preparation, showing not just that I'd built impressive software, but that I'd thought through every aspect of how that software would function in real business environments. 45 minutes into the presentation, I reached the live demonstration section. This was the moment I'd been most excited about, the opportunity to show the board exactly how my system worked with actual customer data. Rather than just describing what the system does, I said, "I'd like to show you." I opened the software, interface and connected to a demonstration database populated with real customer information from one of my beta testing partners, a mid-size manufacturing company that had agreed to participate in presentations like this one. The screen filled with an elegant dashboard that displayed customer relationship data in intuitive, actionable formats. Let's say you're a sales representative preparing for a call with a longtime customer, I began, selecting a customer profile at random. Traditional CRM systems would show you purchase history and basic contact information. My system shows you that this customer typically makes purchasing decisions in the third week of each quarter, prefers email communication over phone calls, and has been researching products in a category you don't currently offer them. The board members leaned forward, studying the interface as I navigated through different features. The system predicted which products this customer was most likely to purchase next, recommended optimal timing for different types of outreach, and even suggested specific messaging approaches based on the customer's communication preferences and past responses. "This is remarkable," Patricia Liu said quietly. "Emma, how long did it take you to develop this level of sophistication?" 2 years of full-time development, I replied. But the foundation concepts have been evolving in my mind for much longer than that. Robert Harrison asked the question I'd been anticipating with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Emma, we've heard some interesting insights about customer relationship management from other sources recently. How does your system compare to existing market solutions?" This was my moment to address Jake's appropriation of my ideas without directly mentioning him or creating unnecessary drama. I'd prepared for this carefully, knowing that Harrison Industries had been exposed to my concepts through Jake's presentations, but not knowing the full extent of what he'd shared or how he'd presented it. "Mr. Harrison, I suspect you may have encountered some of these concepts in other contexts," I said. "Customer relationship optimization has become a popular topic in marketing and consulting circles. But there's a significant difference between discussing these ideas theoretically and actually implementing them through functional software." I advanced to a slide that showed the technical specifications of my system, the machine learning, algorithms, the database architecture, the API integrations, and the user interface design. Anyone can talk about predictive customer analytics or automated relationship optimization. Building software that actually delivers these capabilities requires expertise in artificial intelligence, database management, user experience design, and business process optimization. David Chen nodded thoughtfully. "So you're saying that while others might understand these concepts intellectually, you've actually solved the technical challenges involved in making them work?" "Exactly. Ideas are valuable, but implementation is everything. My system doesn't just incorporate these concepts, it proves they work in real business environments with measurable results." The final portion of my presentation focused on the acquisition proposal itself. Harrison Industries wouldn't just be licensing my software. They'd be acquiring the entire technology platform, including all intellectual property rights, ongoing development resources, and exclusive access to future innovations. In return, I'd receive immediate financial compensation, equity stake in the combined technology division, and the resources to scale my system across Harrison Industries' entire client base. This isn't just a software purchase, I concluded. It's a partnership that positions Harrison Industries as the definitive leader in customer relationship technology. While your competitors are still talking about customer optimization, you'll be delivering it. When I finished speaking, the room was quiet for several moments. Robert Harrison looked around the table at his fellow board members, and I could see silent communication passing between them, The kind of wordless consensus that happens when experienced executives recognize transformative opportunity. Emma. Robert Harrison said finally, "I have just one more question, and I want you to answer honestly. Are you prepared for what happens next? Because if we move forward with this acquisition, your life is about to change dramatically. You'll go from being a talented individual contributor to being a key executive in a major technology company. That's a significant transition." I thought about Jake's text message, about the months of self-doubt that had followed, about the slow realization that I'd been undervaluing my own capabilities for far too long. "Mr. Harrison, I've spent the past few months learning to advocate for my own work. I'm ready to do that on a much larger scale." He smiled. "Then let's talk specifics." The next hour was a blur of contract details, implementation timelines, and strategic planning. Alex Chen joined us by phone to review the legal aspects of the acquisition, and I found myself signing documents that transferred ownership of my life's work to Harrison Industries, while simultaneously making me one of the most well-compensated software developers in Colorado. As the meeting concluded, Patricia Liu approached me privately. "Emma, I have to ask, how did you manage to develop something this sophisticated while maintaining your regular employment? The amount of work this represents is extraordinary." "I spent most of my free time over the past 2 years working on this," I admitted. "Nights, weekends, vacation days. It became my obsession." "What drove that level of dedication?" I considered the question carefully. I knew I had ideas that could make a real difference for businesses and their customers. I just needed to prove it to myself before I could prove it to anyone else. As I packed up my presentation materials, Robert Harrison handed me a business card with his direct contact information. "Emma, I want you to take some time to process what just happened here today. But when you're ready, I'd like to discuss your role in our company's future. We're not just acquiring your software. We're hoping to acquire your vision for what customer relationship management could become." Walking back to my car in the underground garage, I felt like I was moving through a different world than the one I'd inhabited that morning. The same concrete walls, the same fluorescent lighting, the same elevator sounds, but everything had been transformed by what had happened in that 28th floor conference room. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine, letting the magnitude of the day settle into my consciousness. 6 months ago, I'd been a talented but relatively unknown software developer dating a marketing professional who seemed impressed by my technical skills. Today, I'd become a technology executive with equity stake in one of Colorado's most innovative companies. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "How did it go? I've been thinking about you all afternoon." I typed back, "It went exactly the way it was supposed to go." As I drove home through downtown Denver, I realized that Jake's betrayal had actually been a gift, though not one I'd have chosen voluntarily. His appropriation of my ideas had forced me to understand their true value. His casual dismissal of our relationship had pushed me to stop seeking validation from others and start validating myself. His underestimation of my capabilities had motivated me to prove him wrong in the most comprehensive way possible. Tomorrow, Harrison Industries would announce the acquisition. Next week, I'd begin transitioning from my current position to my new role as Director of Customer Intelligence, Technology. Next month, I'd be leading the implementation of my system across Harrison Industries' entire client portfolio. And somewhere in this timeline, Jake would discover that the woman he'd discarded via text message had just become one of the most influential technology professionals in his industry. Not because she'd sought revenge, but because she'd never stopped building something worth recognizing. The Harrison Industries announcement hit the industry news cycle like a controlled explosion. By Thursday morning, 3 days after my presentation, the acquisition was front-page news in Colorado Business Journal, trending on LinkedIn, and being discussed in technology forums across the country. The headline that made me smile most was, "In TechCrunch, Unknown developer's revolutionary CRM system acquired for 8 figures by Harrison Industries. Unknown developer. 6 months ago, that label might have stung. Today, it felt like a badge of honor, proof that you didn't need industry recognition to build something transformative. You just needed vision, persistence, and the courage to bet on your own capabilities when no one else would. I was reading the coverage over morning coffee in my apartment when my phone started buzzing with interview requests. Forbes wanted to discuss the future of customer relationship technology. Harvard Business Review was interested in my perspective on artificial intelligence in business applications. 3 different podcasts had reached out about entrepreneurship and innovation. But the call that caught my attention came from an unexpected source. Tyler Morrison, Jake's college friend who'd posted about Harrison and Associates' recent successes on LinkedIn. His voice carried a strange mix of excitement and nervousness when I answered, "Emma, hey, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Jake ages ago, and I've been following the news about your acquisition." "That's incredible. Congratulations." "Thank you, Tyler. That's very kind. Actually, I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime. I have a startup idea that could really benefit from your expertise, and after seeing what you accomplished, with Harrison Industries, I'd love to get your perspective." The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, Tyler had been part of Jake's social circle, someone who'd politely listened when I talked about my work, but never seemed particularly interested. Now, suddenly, my perspective had become valuable, enough to warrant coffee meetings and business discussions. "I'd be happy to hear about your project," I said. "But I should mention that my schedule is about to become quite busy with the transition to Harrison Industries." "Of course, totally. Understand." Actually, Jake mentioned that you two used to discuss customer management strategies pretty regularly. He said you had some really innovative ideas about data integration. I paused, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. "Did he now?" "Yeah, he was always impressed by your technical insights. Said you understood the business applications better than most of the consultants he worked with." The casual way Tyler repeated Jake's characterization of our relationship made something crystallize in my mind. Jake hadn't just used my ideas in his Harrison Industries presentations. He'd been positioning himself as someone with access to cutting-edge technical expertise throughout his professional network. He'd turned our relationship into a credential, my knowledge into his reputation. "Tyler, I'm curious about something. When Jake talked about these customer management strategies, did he mention that I was developing actual software in this area?" "He said you worked in tech, but I got the impression it was more theoretical stuff. Like, you understood the concepts, but he was the one applying them in real business situations." The breath left my lungs slowly. Jake hadn't just stolen credit for my ideas. He'd actively minimized my role in creating them, presenting himself as the practical implementer of my theoretical knowledge. The systematic nature of his misrepresentation was breathtaking in its audacity. "Tyler, I appreciate you reaching out, but I think there might be some confusion about my background. The Harrison Industries acquisition isn't based on theoretical concepts. It's based on 2 years of software development that I did independently, without any collaboration or consultation from Jake." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. Finally, Tyler spoke again, his voice much quieter than before. "Emma, I'm really sorry. I think I may have misunderstood how Jake described your work. From the way he talked about it, I thought he was the one with the expertise and you were more of a sounding board." "A sounding board," I repeated. "I feel terrible about this. The news coverage makes it clear that you're the innovator here, not just someone who talks about innovation. I apologize for any confusion." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, processing the full scope of Jake's professional theft. It wasn't just that he'd used my ideas without credit. He'd systematically reframed our relationship to position himself as the expert and me as the assistant. Every conversation we'd had about my work, every technical insight I'd shared, every breakthrough I'd explained to him had been repackaged as evidence of his own understanding rather than acknowledgement of mine. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Emma, this is Madison Clark. I know this might seem strange, but I wondered if we could talk. I think there are some things you should know about Jake's presentations to Harrison Industries." I stared at the message for a long moment, torn between curiosity and exhaustion. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to focus on moving forward rather than excavating more evidence of Jake's deception. But another part of me needed to understand the complete picture, to know exactly what I'd been complicit in unknowingly. I texted back, "I'm available this afternoon if you'd like to meet." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet wine bar in Cherry Creek that would be nearly empty on a Thursday afternoon. Madison arrived before me, already seated at a corner table with what looked like a stack of printed documents beside her purse. She stood when she saw me approach, her expression serious and apologetic. "Emma, thank you for agreeing to meet. I know this situation is complicated, and I want you to know that I had no idea about any of this until after our conversation at the coffee shop." I settled into the chair across from her, noting that she looked genuinely distressed rather than defensive. "What exactly did you discover?" Madison pushed the stack of documents toward me. "These are copies of Jake's presentation materials for Harrison Industries over the past 6 months. After Sunday, I started asking questions about where his technical insights were coming from, because they seemed much more sophisticated than anything else he'd produced. I flipped through the pages, recognizing concepts I'd explained to Jake during quiet evenings in my apartment, technical diagrams that resembled sketches I'd drawn on napkins during dinner conversations, strategic frameworks that echoed discussions we'd had while hiking on weekends. Seeing my intellectual property laid out in someone else's presentation format was surreal and infuriating in equal measure. "Madison, why are you showing me this?" She looked down at her hands, which were wrapped around an untouched glass of wine. "Because I work in marketing, and I understand the difference between inspiration and appropriation. What Jake did crosses every ethical line in our profession." "Did you confront him about it?" I tried. He said that couples share ideas naturally, and that he was just applying concepts you'd discussed together. "But Emma, these aren't casual insights from dinner conversations. These are detailed technical strategies that require serious expertise to develop." I continued flipping through the documents, finding more evidence of systematic theft than I'd even suspected. Jake had essentially created a consulting persona based entirely on my knowledge, presenting himself to Harrison Industries as someone with deep technical understanding of customer relationship management systems. "There's something else," Madison said quietly. "Jake has been talking about starting his own consulting firm, focusing specifically on customer relationship optimization. He's been using his success with Harrison Industries as proof of concept for potential investors." The implications hit me like cold water. Jake wasn't just stealing credit for past work. He was building his entire future career on expertise he'd borrowed from me. The breakup suddenly made more sense. He'd extracted everything useful from our relationship and decided he no longer needed access to the source. "Madison, can I ask you something personal? When did you and Jake start seeing each other?" She looked uncomfortable but answered honestly. "We started getting coffee together about 2 months before he broke up with you, but we weren't physically involved until after you two ended things. I want you to know that." "I appreciate your honesty, but I have to ask, during those coffee meetings, did Jake talk about his work with Harrison Industries?" "Constantly. He was so excited about the innovative strategies he was developing for them. He talked about customer data integration and predictive analytics like he'd invented the concepts himself." I closed the folder of documents and looked directly at Madison. "He didn't invent those concepts. I did. Everything he presented to Harrison Industries came from my research and development work. The reason his strategies seemed so innovative is because they were based on software I was building independently. Madison's face went pale. Oh my God. Emma, I had no idea. When Jake talked about his work, he made it sound like these were his original insights. They weren't. And the Harrison Industries acquisition that's been in the news this week, that's based on the same technology Jake was claiming credit for in his presentations. The silence between us was heavy with implication. Madison was processing the realization that she'd been dating someone who'd built his professional reputation on stolen intellectual property, while I was processing the full extent of Jake's calculated deception. "What are you going to do?" Madison asked finally. "I'm going to let the truth speak for itself," I said. "Tomorrow night, Harrison Industries is hosting a reception to announce the acquisition and introduce me to their client network. It's going to be attended by everyone significant in Colorado's technology and business communities." "Including Jake?" "Harrison and Associates has been invited, since they're one of Harrison Industries' marketing partners. So yes, Jake will be there." Madison looked stricken. "Emma, I'm so sorry. If I had known any of this earlier, I would have said something." "Madison, you're not responsible for Jake's choices, but I appreciate you bringing this information to me." We parted ways outside the wine bar, Madison heading toward her car with the dejected posture of someone who'd just discovered their boyfriend was a professional fraud, while I walked to my own vehicle with a strange sense of completion. I finally understood the full scope of what Jake had done, and more importantly, I understood that tomorrow night would provide the perfect opportunity for natural consequences to unfold. That evening, I called Alex Chen to discuss the legal implications of Jake's appropriation of my intellectual property. His response was swift and definitive. "Emma, what Jake did constitutes professional fraud and potentially trademark infringement. You have grounds for a significant lawsuit if you choose to pursue it." "I'm not interested in legal action," I said. "But I want to make sure that Harrison Industries understands the complete picture of where Jake's insights actually originated. Given that they just acquired your technology for a substantial sum, I think they'll be very interested in understanding any misrepresentation that may have occurred during Jake's previous presentations to them." Friday morning brought a flurry of preparation for the evening reception. I spent an hour at the salon, getting my hair styled in a way that looked effortless, but elegant, then chose a navy dress that conveyed authority without being flashy. The goal was to look like exactly what I was, a successful technology executive comfortable in high-stakes professional environments. The reception was being held at the Grand Ballroom of the Oxford Hotel, an elegant downtown venue that Harrison Industries had reserved for the evening's celebration. When I arrived at 6:30, the room was already filling with Colorado's business elite, technology innovators, and potential clients curious about the acquisition that had been dominating industry news all week. Robert Harrison spotted me almost immediately and approached with a warm smile and two other executives I recognized from earlier in the week. "Emma, you look wonderful. Are you ready to meet everyone who's been asking about the genius behind our new technology platform?" "I'm ready," I said, and realized I meant it completely. The next hour was a blur of introductions, congratulations, and technical discussions with business leaders who wanted to understand how my system could benefit their own companies. I found myself in conversations with CEOs, venture capitalists, and technology directors, all of them interested in the woman who'd developed software significant enough to warrant an 8-figure acquisition. Around 8 o'clock, I was discussing implementation timelines with a group of potential clients when I saw Jake enter the ballroom. He was wearing a navy suit that looked expensive and new, his hair styled differently than I remembered, and Madison was beside him in a black cocktail dress. They both paused just inside the entrance, scanning the room with the careful attention of people trying to orient themselves in unfamiliar social territory. Jake's eyes found mine across the room, and I saw recognition followed immediately by something that looked like panic. He said something to Madison, who glanced in my direction and then looked away quickly. They moved toward the bar, clearly hoping to blend into the crowd and avoid direct interaction. But the business community in Denver isn't that large, and Jake's work with Harrison Industries had made him a recognizable figure at events like this. Within minutes, several people had approached him, congratulating him on his company's association with the evening's big announcement. I watched from across the room as Jake accepted these congratulations with increasingly strained smiles, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Patricia Liu, Harrison Industries' Chief Technology Officer, approached my conversation circle with a glass of wine and a curious expression. "Emma, I've been meaning to ask you something. Robert mentioned that we've worked with your ex-boyfriend's marketing firm on several projects. Jake Thompson from Harrison & Associates. Did you two ever collaborate professionally?" The question carried across our conversation group, and suddenly everyone was listening with the interest that comes from sensing potential drama. I considered my response carefully, wanting to be truthful without creating unnecessary spectacle. "Jake and I never collaborated professionally," I said clearly. "My development work was entirely independent, though I did share some general insights about customer relationship management during our personal conversations." "That's interesting," Patricia continued, "because Jake's presentations to our company have included some remarkably sophisticated technical concepts that align very closely with the system we just acquired from you." The implications of her statement weren't lost on anyone in our circle. Several executives exchanged glances, and I could see the mental calculations happening as people processed what they'd just heard. Sometimes people in marketing roles become very good at understanding and communicating technical concepts, I said diplomatically. Though there's always a difference between understanding existing innovations and actually creating them. At that moment, Robert Harrison appeared at my elbow with Jake beside him, having apparently decided that introductions were unavoidable given the circumstances. Jake looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in Colorado, but he managed a professional smile as Robert made the formal introduction. "Emma, I'd like you to meet Jake Thompson from Harrison & Associates. Jake, this is Emma Rodriguez, the brilliant developer whose system we just acquired." Jake extended his hand for a handshake, and I accepted it with perfect professional courtesy. "Hello, Jake. Congratulations on your recent promotion at Harrison & Associates." "Thank you," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "And congratulations on your acquisition. That's quite an achievement." "Thank you. It's been rewarding to see 2 years of development work finally get the recognition it deserves." The emphasis on 2 years wasn't lost on Jake, whose jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Robert Harrison, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued the conversation enthusiastically. "Jake, you'll appreciate this. Emma's system incorporates many of the same concepts you've been discussing with us in your presentations. Customer data integration, predictive analytics, automated relationship optimization. It's like you two were thinking along the same lines." "Great minds think alike," Jake said weakly. "Actually," I said, maintaining my professional smile, "my system has been in development since early 2022. It's fascinating how certain innovations seem to emerge in multiple places simultaneously." Patricia Liu, who had been listening to this exchange with growing interest, asked the question I'd been hoping someone would ask. "Jake, what's your technical background in customer relationship management systems?" Jake's color deepened slightly. "My expertise is more on the strategic and communication side. I focus on how to present these concepts to business audiences rather than the technical implementation." "I see," Patricia said thoughtfully. "So when you presented those detailed technical frameworks to our board, you were translating concepts you'd learned from other sources?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake glanced around the circle of executives, all of whom were now paying very close attention to his response. Madison had appeared at his side, looking like she wanted to rescue him from the conversation but didn't know how. "I draw insights from various sources," Jake said carefully. "The consulting process involves synthesizing ideas from multiple areas of expertise." "Of course," I said pleasantly. "Synthesis is such an important skill in consulting. Though I imagine it must be challenging when your sources aren't publicly available. How do you typically credit the original developers of the concepts you present? Jake's face was now noticeably flushed, and sweat had appeared along his hairline, despite the cool temperature in the ballroom. It's complicated in collaborative environments where ideas develop organically. Robert Harrison was beginning to look confused by the direction of the conversation, clearly sensing tension he didn't understand. Well, regardless of where ideas originate, what matters is implementation. And Emma, your implementation is extraordinary. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Implementation has always been my strength. I prefer building actual solutions to discussing theoretical ones. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, but Jake excused himself as soon as politeness allowed, taking Madison with him toward the other side of the ballroom. I watched them go, noting how Jake kept glancing back toward our group with the nervous energy of someone who knows their professional reputation has just been quietly but thoroughly demolished. Patricia Liu lingered after the others had moved, on to different conversations. Emma, that was illuminating. I think there are some internal discussions we need to have about our relationship with Harrison and Associates. I'm sure you're very capable of evaluating your vendor relationships based on your own criteria, I said neutrally. Indeed we are. And we place a very high value on intellectual honesty in our business partnerships. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, business card exchanges, and discussions about the future of customer relationship technology. But I was aware throughout of Jake's presence across the room, how he seemed to deflate as the evening progressed, how Madison stayed close to his side with increasing protectiveness, how they left earlier than would have been normal for a networking event of this importance. As the reception wound down, Robert Harrison found me near the coat check. Emma, I hope you enjoyed this evening. It's just the beginning of what I think will be a very exciting partnership. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm looking forward to everything we're going to build together. There is one thing I wanted to mention, he said, his tone becoming more serious. After tonight's conversations, I think we need to have a discussion about our marketing partnerships and how we ensure that all our vendor relationships maintain the highest standards of professional integrity. I nodded. That sounds very prudent. We'll talk more on Monday. But Emma, I want you to know that Harrison Industries has zero tolerance for intellectual property misrepresentation. If anyone has been presenting your innovations as their own work, we will address that situation decisively. Walking to my car in the parking garage beneath the Oxford Hotel, I reflected on how perfectly the evening had unfolded. I hadn't sought confrontation or created drama. I'd simply answered questions honestly and allowed the truth to emerge naturally through normal business conversation. Jake's appropriation of my work had been exposed not through accusation, but through the simple process of people asking logical questions about expertise and attribution. By tomorrow, word would spread through Denver's business community about the evening's revelations. Jake's reputation as an innovative consultant would be replaced by questions about his sources and methods. Harrison and Associates would likely terminate their relationship with Harrison Industries to avoid association with intellectual property issues. And Jake would discover that building a career on borrowed expertise becomes impossible once the original source is identified and celebrated. I drove home through downtown Denver feeling not vindicated, but complete. The woman who'd received a casual breakup text 6 weeks ago had been someone who questioned her own worth and accepted other people's undervaluation of her contributions. The woman driving home from the Oxford Hotel was someone who knew exactly what she was worth and had claimed recognition commensurate with her value. Jake had discarded me assuming I was replaceable and forgettable. Tonight, he'd learned that some people are irreplaceable precisely because they create rather than appropriate, build rather than borrow, and persist rather than abandon when the work gets difficult. His text message had been intended as an ending. Instead, it had become the beginning of everything he'd lost and everything I'd gained. 4 months after the Harrison Industries reception, I was sitting in my new corner office on the 30th floor, watching early morning fog roll across the Denver skyline while reviewing implementation reports that showed my customer intelligence. System operating in 47 companies across 12 countries. The numbers were staggering. Average customer satisfaction improvements of 38%, operational efficiency gains exceeding 40%, and revenue optimization that had some clients seeing profit increases of over 25% within their first quarter of deployment. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert Harrison. "Emma, board meeting in 20 minutes. Big news to share." I gathered my tablet and the quarterly reports I'd been analyzing, straightening my burgundy blazer as I headed toward the executive conference room. The hallway felt different now than it had 9 months ago when I'd first walked into this building as a nervous software architect hoping to land a consulting contract. Today, I moved through these spaces with the confidence of someone who belonged in rooms where major decisions were made. The boardroom was already filling with executives when I arrived, their conversations pausing as I took my seat at the table. Over the past months, I'd earned their respect through consistent delivery of results that exceeded every projection they'd established. My system wasn't just performing well, it was revolutionizing how businesses understood and served their customers. Robert Harrison stood at the head of the table with the expression he wore when announcing developments that would reshape the company's trajectory. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've called this meeting to discuss the most significant opportunity in Harrison Industries' 15-year history. Emma's customer intelligence platform has attracted acquisition interest from 3 major technology corporations, with preliminary offers ranging from $150 to $220 million. The silence in the room was profound. The kind that follows announcements so significant that immediate response becomes impossible. I felt my heartbeat slow rather than quicken, a strange calm settling over me as I processed the magnitude of what he'd just revealed. "However," Robert continued, "I believe we have a better opportunity than selling Emma's technology to someone else. I'm proposing that we spin off a new company, Harrison Technologies, with Emma as Chief Executive Officer and majority stakeholder. This would allow us to maintain strategic partnerships while giving Emma complete autonomy to develop her innovations, without corporate constraints." Patricia Liu leaned forward, her expression reflecting the same surprise I was feeling. "Robert, are you suggesting that Emma would own and operate her technology independently?" "I'm suggesting that Emma has built something too valuable and too revolutionary to remain contained within our existing corporate structure. Her system represents the future of customer relationship management, and that future deserves a company, designed specifically to support its development." The discussion that followed covered financial structures, legal arrangements, and operational timelines, but I found myself thinking about the woman who'd walked into this building less than a year ago, hoping to secure recognition for work she'd developed in isolation. That woman had been seeking validation from others. The woman sitting at this table was being offered the opportunity to validate herself through entrepreneurial leadership. After the meeting concluded, Robert asked me to stay behind for a private conversation. The boardroom felt different when empty, more intimate and honest than it did when filled with the formal energy of executive decision-making. "Emma, I want you to understand what I'm offering and why I'm offering it. This isn't just about business opportunity. It's about recognizing that you've outgrown what we can provide here." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you're an entrepreneur who's been operating within corporate constraints. Your innovations require the kind of creative freedom and strategic flexibility that only comes with independent ownership. Harrison Industries can be your partner, but we can't be your limitation." I looked out the window at the Denver skyline, thinking about all the conversations I'd had with Jake about professional ambition and career development. He'd always spoken about success in terms of climbing existing hierarchies, advancing within established systems. "The opportunity, Robert, was presenting involved creating entirely new systems based on my own vision and capabilities. Robert, I need some time to process this offer and discuss it with my advisors. When would you need a decision? Take all the time you need. But Emma, I want you to know that this opportunity exists because of what you've built, not because of what we're offering you. We're simply recognizing value that already exists and providing a structure to maximize its impact. That evening, I called Alex Chen to discuss the legal implications of establishing an independent technology company. His excitement was immediate and infectious, the response of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this conversation. Emma, this is extraordinary. Not just the financial opportunity, but the chance to build something from the ground up based on your own vision. How are you feeling about the transition from employee to entrepreneur? Terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, I admitted. A year ago, I was hoping to gain recognition for my work. Now I'm being offered the chance to build an entire company around that work. That's not an accident. Recognition led to opportunity because you built something genuinely valuable. The question now is whether you're ready to take full responsibility for developing that value. I think I am, but it means leaving behind everything familiar and comfortable about working within an established organization. Emma, comfort is overrated. Excellence requires discomfort, and you've been excellent at everything you've undertaken. This is just the next logical step in that progression. I spent the weekend hiking in the Rockies, using the physical challenge and natural beauty to process the decision that would define the next phase of my career. The trail I chose was one I'd never hiked before, a metaphor for the unknown territory I was considering entering as an entrepreneur. At the summit, overlooking valleys that stretched toward horizons I couldn't see, I realized that my entire professional journey had been preparing me for this moment. Every coding challenge I'd solved, every client problem I'd addressed, every innovation I'd developed had been building toward the opportunity to create something entirely my own. Monday morning, I walked into Robert Harrison's office and accepted his proposal to establish Harrison Technologies as an independent company under my leadership. The announcement of the new company generated significant attention in technology, media, with industry analysts describing it as one of the most promising spin-offs in recent memory. The initial valuation placed Harrison Technologies at over $180 million, making me one of the youngest female CEOs in the global technology sector. But the media attention, while gratifying, was less important than the personal messages I received from women who'd been following my career development. Sarah sent a text that perfectly captured what the announcement represented. Emma, you've gone from seeking recognition for your work to owning the company built around that work. That's not just professional success, that's a complete redefinition of what's possible. The transition from employee to entrepreneur required learning entirely new skills while maintaining the technical excellence that had created the opportunity in the first place. I spent mornings meeting with legal advisors, financial consultants, and business strategists, then afternoons reviewing code, analyzing system performance, and collaborating with development teams. Dr. Catherine Walsh, my business mentor, helped me navigate the psychological challenges that came with sudden elevation to executive leadership. Emma, the most difficult aspect of entrepreneurship isn't technical or financial. It's learning to trust your own judgment when there's no higher authority to provide validation. What do you mean? I mean that as an employee, you could always defer ultimate responsibility to supervisors or company policies. As an entrepreneur, every major decision stops with you. That's simultaneously the greatest opportunity and the greatest challenge of business ownership. Her insight proved prescient during my first month as CEO, when I faced decisions about international expansion, hiring strategies, and technology development that would impact hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. The woman who'd once sought Jake's approval for career decisions was now making choices that affected global business operations. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jake had dismissed me via text message, assuming I was replaceable and forgettable. Now I was leading a company whose technology was transforming how businesses operated worldwide, while his career remained confined to presenting borrowed insights to clients who would never know the original source of his expertise. 3 months after establishing Harrison Technologies, I received an email that provided unexpected closure to that chapter of my life. Madison Clark had reached out, requesting a meeting to discuss something she described as important and overdue. We met at a coffee shop in Cherry Creek, neutral territory, where we could have an honest conversation without the complications of our shared history with Jake. Madison arrived looking more serious and focused than I'd ever seen her, carrying a folder that suggested she'd come prepared for a substantive discussion. "Emma, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know our relationship has been complicated because of Jake, but I wanted to update you on some developments and offer an apology I should have given months ago." "What kind of developments?" "I ended my relationship with Jake 6 weeks after the Harrison Industries reception. Once I understood the full scope of what he'd been doing professionally, I couldn't continue dating someone who'd built his career on appropriating other people's expertise." I wasn't entirely surprised, but I was curious about what had finally convinced her to end things. "What changed your mind?" "Several things. First, I started paying attention to his presentations and realized that his technical insights were much more sophisticated than anything else he produced. When I asked him about it, he gave vague answers about collaborative development and shared industry knowledge." Madison opened her folder and pushed several documents toward me. "But what really convinced me was finding these in his apartment. Copies of emails he'd sent to potential clients, describing his expertise in customer relationship management and data integration. He was actively marketing himself as someone with deep technical knowledge, using terminology and concepts I'd heard you explain during our first meeting at the coffee shop." I flipped through the pages, recognizing phrases I'd used to explain complex algorithms, strategic frameworks I'd developed through months of testing and refinement, technical specifications that represented years of specialized education and experience. Seeing my intellectual property presented as Jake's expertise was infuriating and validating simultaneously. Infuriating because of the theft, validating because it confirmed the value of what I'd created independently. "Madison, why are you showing me this?" "Because I profited from Jake's success, even unknowingly. He took me to industry events where people congratulated him on innovations that were actually yours. He bought expensive dinners with money earned by presenting your work as his original insights. I was complicit even if I didn't understand what was happening." Her honesty was unexpected and appreciated. Many people would have simply ended the relationship quietly rather than taking responsibility for their inadvertent role in someone else's deception. "What are you planning to do professionally now?" "I've started my own marketing consultancy, focusing specifically on ethical representation of technical innovations. My experience with Jake taught me how much damage marketing professionals can cause when they misrepresent expertise they don't possess." We talked for another hour about her new business, my transition to entrepreneurship, and the lessons we'd both learned from our intersecting experiences with professional dishonesty. When we parted ways, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected, not just about Jake, but about the entire situation that had catalyzed my transformation. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for dinner, wanting to share news about Harrison Technologies with the people who'd supported my ambitions, long before anyone else recognized their potential. My father was grading papers in his study when I arrived, while my mother was preparing the mushroom risotto she'd been perfecting since I was in college. "How does it feel to be a CEO?" my mother asked as she handed me wine and gestured toward the kitchen island where I'd sat during countless conversations about school, career, and life decisions. "Surreal and natural at the same time," I said. "Surreal because 2 years ago I was hoping to land consulting contracts. Natural because Everything I'm doing now feels like the logical extension of work I've been developing for years. What's the most challenging aspect of running your own company? I considered the question carefully. Learning to trust my own judgment completely. As an employee, I could always defer difficult decisions to supervisors or company policies. As an entrepreneur, every major choice ultimately comes down to my analysis and instincts. That sounds like a significant responsibility. It is. But it's also exactly the kind of responsibility I've been preparing for without realizing it. Every technical problem I've solved, every client challenge I've addressed, every innovation I've developed has been building toward this opportunity. My father joined us for dinner, bringing with him the contentment that comes from meaningful work pursued with integrity and persistence. Over pasta and wine, we discussed the expansion plans for Harrison Technologies, the international opportunities, emerging in European and Asian markets, and the personal growth that had accompanied my professional advancement. "Emma?" my father said as we were clearing the table. "I want you to know how proud we are of how you've handled everything that's happened. You could have become bitter about Jake's betrayal, but instead you used it as motivation to build something remarkable. I learned from watching both of you that success comes from contributing value, not from seeking recognition. The recognition becomes inevitable when the value is genuine and significant." That's exactly right. And now you're in a position to help other people learn the same lesson. His comment sparked an idea that had been developing in my mind for several weeks. What if I created a mentorship program specifically designed to help women in technology develop the confidence and business skills needed to advance their careers or start their own companies? I discussed the concept with Dr. Catherine Walsh during our next mentoring session, describing my vision for a program that would combine technical skill development with business strategy training and personal confidence building. "Emma, that's a brilliant idea. You've learned so much about translating technical expertise into business success, and those insights could be invaluable for other women facing similar challenges. I'm thinking about calling it the Innovation Circle, focusing on the idea that women need to build networks where their expertise is valued and developed, rather than dismissed or appropriated. What would the program structure look like? Monthly workshops covering different aspects of professional development, from technical presentation skills to business strategy fundamentals, but also individual mentoring relationships and group projects that allow participants to collaborate on real innovation challenges. The Innovation Circle program launched 3 months later with an initial cohort of 25 women from across the Denver technology community. The diversity of backgrounds and expertise levels created a dynamic learning environment where senior professionals shared insights while junior developers contributed fresh perspectives on emerging technologies. The most rewarding aspect of the program wasn't the professional development it provided, but the transformation I witnessed in participants' confidence and ambition. Women who'd been apologizing for their technical expertise started presenting their innovations with authority. Engineers who'd been accepting credit for their work started claiming appropriate recognition. Developers who'd been limiting their career goals started pursuing opportunities that matched their capabilities rather than their insecurities. One participant, a data scientist named Jennifer, who'd been struggling with imposter syndrome despite her advanced degrees and impressive project portfolio, sent me an email that perfectly captured what the program was achieving. "Emma, I wanted to let you know that I just accepted a position as senior data scientist at a major healthcare technology company. 6 months ago, I was convinced I wasn't qualified for senior-level roles, despite having more experience than most of my male colleagues. Your program didn't just teach me technical skills, it taught me to value my own expertise appropriately." Meanwhile, Harrison Technologies was expanding rapidly, with quarterly revenue growth that consistently exceeded projections and client satisfaction scores that positioned us as a leader in customer intelligence solutions. We'd grown from the original team of 12 developers to over 60 employees across 3 offices, with international expansion planned for the following year. The success was gratifying, but what I found most meaningful was the realization that I'd created something that would endure beyond individual relationships or personal circumstances. Jake's appropriation of my ideas had been opportunistic and temporary, dependent on his access to my knowledge through our personal relationship. The company I'd built was based on genuine innovation and authentic expertise that belonged entirely to me. 6 months after launching the Innovation Circle program, I received an invitation that would reshape my understanding of what was possible in my career. The International Technology Leadership Conference had selected me as their keynote speaker, recognizing Harrison Technologies as one of the most innovative startups in the global customer relationship management sector. The conference would bring together over 3,000 technology executives, entrepreneurs, and investors from around the world, providing a platform to share insights about innovation, leadership, and the future of business technology. The invitation was both an honor and an opportunity to influence conversations about how the technology industry could better support and recognize diverse contributions to innovation. I spent weeks preparing a presentation that tried to capture everything I'd learned about building sustainable success in technology while maintaining authentic professional relationships and personal integrity. The core message was simple but powerful. Genuine innovation requires authentic expertise, and authentic expertise deserves appropriate recognition and compensation. The conference was held in Austin, with attendees representing every aspect of the global technology ecosystem. My keynote was scheduled for the opening day, setting the tone for 3 days of discussions about technological advancement and industry leadership. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience that included some of the most influential people in global technology, I felt a profound sense of responsibility and opportunity. These were individuals who made decisions that affected millions of users, shaped industry standards, and determined which innovations would receive the resources needed for widespread implementation. 18 months ago, I began. I was a software architect hoping to gain recognition for customer intelligence technology I'd developed independently. Today, I'm the CEO of a company built around that technology, with clients on 4 continents and revenue approaching $50 million annually. This transformation wasn't the result of luck or timing. It was the result of refusing to accept undervaluation of genuine expertise. I told the story of Harrison Technologies' development, focusing on the business lessons rather than personal drama, but acknowledging the role that professional dismissal had played in motivating me to claim full ownership of my innovations. The most important thing I've learned is that seeking validation from people who don't understand your work is like asking someone who's never written code to debug your algorithms. Their opinion might be well-intentioned, but it's not qualified to determine the value of your technical contributions. The presentation concluded with a challenge to the audience. I want every person in this room to leave here committed to recognizing and supporting authentic innovation, regardless of its source. The future of technology depends not just on what we build, but on how we acknowledge and compensate the people who build it. The response was immediate and overwhelming, with sustained applause and questions that continued long after the formal presentation ended. But the most meaningful feedback came from individual conversations with attendees who shared their own experiences with professional undervaluation and the strategies they'd developed for claiming appropriate recognition. One woman, a machine learning engineer from Berlin, approached me after the presentation with visible emotion. "Emma, your story gave me the courage to pursue something I've been afraid to attempt. I've been developing artificial intelligence, applications for environmental monitoring, but I've been hesitant to start my own company because I didn't think I had enough business experience. Listening to you, I realized that technical expertise combined with willingness to learn is sufficient qualification for entrepreneurship." Flying back to Denver after the conference, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since receiving Jake's casual breakup text. The woman who'd been hurt by that dismissal had been seeking external validation for internal worth. The woman returning from Austin had learned to generate that validation through authentic achievement and meaningful contribution. That realization led to a decision I'd been contemplating for several months: expanding Harrison Technologies into international markets, starting with European operations that could serve as a foundation for global growth. The customer intelligence system had proven its value across diverse American business environments, and the demand for similar solutions in European markets was substantial and growing. The international expansion would require establishing offices in London and Frankfurt, hiring local teams who understood regional business practices and regulatory requirements, and adapting our technology for different cultural approaches to customer relationship management. It was an ambitious undertaking that would test every aspect of my leadership capabilities. But it was also the logical next step for a company that had always been designed to solve universal business challenges, rather than regional problems. Customer relationship optimization was as important for companies in London as it was for businesses in Denver, and the artificial intelligence applications that powered our system could be adapted for any market where businesses served customers. I spent the next 3 months preparing for international expansion, working with legal advisors who specialized in European business law, consulting with cultural experts who could help adapt our approach for different markets, and interviewing potential employees who could establish our overseas operations. The preparation process taught me more about global business than I'd learned throughout my entire previous career. European data protection regulations were significantly more complex than American standards, requiring modifications to our system architecture that enhanced privacy protections while maintaining analytical capabilities. Cultural differences in business communication meant that our user interfaces needed to emphasize collaboration and consensus building rather than individual efficiency and automation. But the most significant challenge wasn't technical or regulatory. It was personal. Leading international expansion meant spending extended periods away from Denver, establishing new professional relationships in unfamiliar cultural contexts, and managing operations across multiple time zones and languages. The first European office opened in London 6 months later, in a modern building near Canary Wharf that reflected the innovative nature of our technology while respecting the traditional business culture of British financial services. I spent the initial month in London personally overseeing the launch, working with local employees to adapt our systems for European markets, and meeting with potential clients who were interested in customer intelligence applications. But the most significant development during that London stay wasn't professional. It was personal. I met Dr. James Mitchell, a data scientist who'd been hired as a consultant to help navigate European privacy regulations and cultural adaptation requirements for our technology platform. James was brilliant without being arrogant, curious about my work without being threatened by my expertise, and genuinely excited about the practical applications of artificial intelligence in business environments. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours, covering everything from machine learning ethics to the cultural implications of customer data analysis. By the end of that initial meeting, I realized I was talking to someone who not only understood what I did professionally, but who could contribute meaningfully to conversations about improving and expanding it. He asked technical questions that demonstrated genuine comprehension, offered insights that enhanced my own thinking, and treated my expertise as something to be celebrated rather than appropriated or minimized. "Emma," he said as we were finishing, our second pot of coffee at a quiet pub near the Thames, "I have to tell you, it's refreshing to meet someone who's actually built what they're discussing, rather than just talking about theoretical possibilities." "What do you mean?" "I've attended so many presentations where consultants discuss customer intelligence and predictive analytics like they're revolutionary concepts. But when you ask about implementation details, it becomes clear they're recycling ideas from other sources. You're the first person I've met who can explain not just what these systems should accomplish, but exactly how they work in practice." His comment reminded me of Jake's appropriation of my work, but not with anger or resentment. With gratitude for the contrast. James's appreciation was based on understanding my actual capabilities rather than being impressed by surface-level descriptions of technical concepts. He valued my expertise because he possessed enough knowledge himself to recognize the difference between genuine innovation and borrowed insights. Over the following weeks, James and I worked closely together on adapting Harrison Technologies' systems for European compliance requirements, a collaboration that was both intellectually stimulating and professionally productive. He challenged my assumptions about user interface design, suggested improvements to our privacy protection algorithms, and helped me understand cultural nuances that would make our technology more effective in European business environments. More importantly, he treated our collaboration as a partnership between equals, rather than a consultation where one person provided expertise while the other consumed it. His contributions enhanced my work, while my innovations expanded his understanding of practical applications for regulatory compliance. We were building something together that neither of us could have created independently. 3 weeks into my London stay, James suggested we spend a weekend exploring Cambridge and Oxford, historic university towns that represented centuries of intellectual achievement and academic excellence. It was the first time I'd taken a complete break from work since arriving in London, and the change of scenery provided perspective on how much my life had evolved over the past 2 years. We were walking through Cambridge's ancient courtyards, discussing the intersection of historical tradition and contemporary innovation, when James asked the question I'd been expecting since we'd started spending time together outside of work. "Emma, can I ask you something personal? You've mentioned your ex-boyfriend several times, always in the context of professional misrepresentation. What exactly happened there?" I told him the complete story, from Jake's casual breakup text through the Harrison Industries reception, where his appropriation of my work had been naturally exposed through normal business conversation. James listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious as I described the systematic nature of Jake's intellectual property theft. "That's appalling," he said when I finished. "Not just the personal betrayal, but the professional fraud." In European business culture, that kind of misrepresentation would end someone's career permanently and make them unemployable in their industry. It did end his career in Denver. But what I found most valuable about the experience was learning to stop seeking validation from people who weren't qualified to provide it. "What do you mean?" I realized that I'd been attracted to Jake, partly because he seemed impressed by my technical skills, and that felt validating. But I understand now that I don't need someone to be impressed by what I do. I need someone who understands what I do well enough to contribute meaningfully to conversations about it. James smiled. "Like this conversation?" "Exactly like this conversation." When I returned to Denver after 6 weeks in London, the city felt simultaneously familiar and constraining, like visiting a place where you'd once lived but had outgrown intellectually and professionally. My Denver apartment looked exactly the same, but I felt like a different person walking through rooms that had been designed for someone with smaller ambitions and more limited horizons. Harrison Technologies' Denver operations had continued successfully during my absence, but everyone was eager to hear about the European expansion and the opportunities emerging in international markets. I spent my first week back conducting comprehensive debriefings with the entire team, sharing insights about cultural adaptation, regulatory compliance, and business development strategies that would benefit our domestic operations as well as international growth. The London office had exceeded every projection we'd established for its first quarter, with client satisfaction scores that matched our best American results and revenue growth that supported aggressive expansion plans for the following year. More importantly, the European launch had validated our assumption that customer relationship optimization was a universal business challenge that could be addressed through culturally adapted applications of our core technology. But the most significant development wasn't professional, it was personal. James and I had maintained daily contact through video calls and collaborative work on research projects, developing a relationship that enhanced both our individual expertise, and our shared understanding of international business challenges. 6 months later, Robert Harrison approached me with a proposition that would redefine Harrison Technologies' growth trajectory and my role as its leader. He wanted to discuss the possibility of a strategic partnership that would provide resources for accelerated global expansion while maintaining my company's independence and innovative culture. Emma, Harrison Industries has been following your international progress, and we're impressed by what you've accomplished in London. We'd like to propose a formal partnership that would provide capital and operational support for expansion into Asian markets. What kind of partnership are you envisioning? We're thinking about a joint venture structure that would allow Harrison Technologies to maintain complete autonomy over technology development and business strategy while accessing Harrison Industries' resources for market entry and operational scaling. The proposal was intriguing because it offered the benefits of corporate backing without the constraints of corporate ownership. Harrison Technologies would remain an independent company under my leadership, but with access to resources that could accelerate our growth timeline by several years. Robert, I'm interested in exploring this possibility. What would be the next steps for evaluating the partnership structure? Legal and financial due diligence, followed by strategic planning, sessions to determine how our companies could collaborate most effectively. If we can structure something that benefits both organizations while preserving your company's innovative culture, I think we could build something remarkable together. The partnership negotiations took 3 months to complete, involving lawyers, financial advisors, and strategic consultants who specialized in joint venture structures for technology companies. The final agreement provided Harrison Technologies with $25 million in expansion capital while maintaining my majority ownership and complete operational control. Leading international expansion meant spending extended periods away from Denver, establishing new professional relationships in unfamiliar cultural contexts, and managing operations across multiple time zones and languages. The first European office opened in London 6 months later, in a modern building near Canary Wharf that reflected the innovative nature of our technology while respecting the traditional business culture of British financial services. I spent the initial month in London personally overseeing the launch, working with local employees to adapt our systems for European markets, and meeting with potential clients who were interested in customer intelligence applications. But the most significant development during that London stay wasn't professional. It was personal. I met Dr. James Mitchell, a data scientist who'd been hired as a consultant to help navigate European privacy regulations and cultural adaptation requirements for our technology platform. James was brilliant without being arrogant, curious about my work without being threatened by my expertise, and genuinely excited about the practical applications of artificial intelligence in business environments. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours, covering everything from machine learning ethics to the cultural implications of customer data analysis. By the end of that initial meeting, I realized I was talking to someone who not only understood what I did professionally, but who could contribute meaningfully to conversations about improving and expanding it. He asked technical questions that demonstrated genuine comprehension, offered insights that enhanced my own thinking, and treated my expertise as something to be celebrated rather than appropriated or minimized. "Emma," he said as we were finishing, our second pot of coffee at a quiet pub near the Thames, "I have to tell you, it's refreshing to meet someone who's actually built what they're discussing, rather than just talking about theoretical possibilities." "What do you mean?" "I've attended so many presentations where consultants discuss customer intelligence and predictive analytics like they're revolutionary concepts. But when you ask about implementation details, it becomes clear they're recycling ideas from other sources. You're the first person I've met who can explain not just what these systems should accomplish, but exactly how they work in practice." His comment reminded me of Jake's appropriation of my work, but not with anger or resentment, with gratitude for the contrast. James's appreciation was based on understanding my actual capabilities, rather than being impressed by surface-level descriptions of technical concepts. He valued my expertise because he possessed enough knowledge himself to recognize the difference between genuine innovation and borrowed insights. Over the following weeks, James and I worked closely together on adapting Harrison Technologies' systems for European compliance requirements, a collaboration that was both intellectually stimulating and professionally productive. He challenged my assumptions about user interface design, suggested improvements to our privacy protection algorithms, and helped me understand cultural nuances that would make our technology more effective in European business environments. More importantly, he treated our collaboration as a partnership between equals rather than a consultation where one person provided expertise while the other consumed it. His contributions enhanced my work while my innovations expanded his understanding of practical applications for regulatory compliance. We were building something together that neither of us could have created independently. 3 weeks into my London stay, James suggested we spend a weekend exploring Cambridge and Oxford, historic university towns that represented centuries of intellectual achievement and academic excellence. It was the first time I'd taken a complete break from work since arriving in London, and the change of scenery provided perspective on how much my life had evolved over the past 2 years. We were walking through Cambridge's ancient courtyards, discussing the intersection of historical tradition and contemporary innovation, when James asked the question I'd been expecting since we'd started spending time together outside of work. "Emma, can I ask you something personal? You've mentioned your ex-boyfriend several times, always in the context of professional misrepresentation. What exactly happened there?" I told him the complete story, from Jake's casual breakup text through the Harrison Industries reception, where his appropriation of my work had been naturally exposed through normal business conversation. James listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious as I described the systematic nature of Jake's intellectual property theft. "That's appalling," he said when I finished. "Not just the personal betrayal, but the professional fraud. In European business culture, that kind of misrepresentation would end someone's career permanently and make them unemployable in their industry." It did end his career in Denver. But what I found most valuable about the experience was learning to stop seeking validation from people who weren't qualified to provide it. "What do you mean?" I realized that I'd been attracted to Jake, partly because he seemed impressed by my technical skills, and that felt validating. But I understand now that I don't need someone to be impressed by what I do. I need someone who understands what I do well enough to contribute meaningfully to conversations about it. James smiled. "Like this conversation?" "Exactly like this conversation." When I returned to Denver after 6 weeks in London, the city felt simultaneously familiar and constraining, like visiting a place where you'd once lived but had outgrown intellectually and professionally. My Denver apartment looked exactly the same, but I felt like a different person walking through rooms that had been designed for someone with smaller ambitions and more limited horizons. Harrison Technologies' Denver operations had continued successfully during my absence, but everyone was eager to hear about the European expansion and the opportunities emerging in international markets. I spent my first week back conducting comprehensive debriefings with the entire team, sharing insights about cultural adaptation, regulatory compliance, and business development strategies that would benefit our domestic operations as well as international growth. The London office had exceeded every projection we'd established for its first quarter, with client satisfaction scores that matched our best American results and revenue growth that supported aggressive expansion plans for the following year. More importantly, the European launch had validated our assumption that customer relationship optimization was a universal business challenge that could be addressed through culturally adapted applications of our core technology. But the most significant development wasn't professional. It was personal. James and I had maintained daily contact through video calls and collaborative work on research projects, developing a relationship that enhanced both our individual expertise and our shared understanding of international business challenges. 6 months later, Robert Harrison approached me with a proposition that would redefine Harrison Technologies' growth trajectory and my role as its leader. He wanted to discuss the possibility of a strategic partnership that would provide resources for accelerated global expansion while maintaining my company's independence and innovative culture. Emma, Harrison Industries has been following your international progress, and we're impressed by what you've accomplished in London. We'd like to propose a formal partnership that would provide capital and operational support for expansion into Asian markets. What kind of partnership are you envisioning? We're thinking about a joint venture structure that would allow Harrison Technologies to maintain complete autonomy over technology development and business strategy while accessing Harrison Industries' resources for market entry and operational scaling. The proposal was intriguing because it offered the benefits of corporate backing without the constraints of corporate ownership. Harrison Technologies would remain an independent company under my leadership, but with access to resources that could accelerate our growth timeline by several years. Robert, I'm interested in exploring this possibility. What would be the next steps for evaluating the partnership structure? Legal and financial due diligence, followed by strategic planning. Sessions to determine how our companies could collaborate most effectively. If we can structure something that benefits both organizations while preserving your company's innovative culture, I think we could build something remarkable together. The partnership negotiations took 3 months to complete, involving lawyers, financial advisors, and strategic consultants who specialized in joint venture structures for technology companies. The final agreement provided Harrison Technologies with $25 million in expansion capital while maintaining my majority ownership and complete operational control. But the message that resonated most deeply was from a woman who'd participated in the very first Innovation Circle workshop 3 years earlier. Emma, I wanted to let you know that I just launched my own artificial intelligence consulting firm, specializing in machine learning applications for environmental sustainability. 3 years ago, I was apologizing for my technical expertise and accepting others' credit for innovations I'd developed independently. Today, I'm leading a team of 12 engineers and pursuing contracts with organizations that serve millions of users globally. Your program didn't just teach me professional skills, it taught me to value my own capabilities appropriately. Thank you for showing me what becomes possible when women stop seeking permission to be excellent. Reading that message, I realized that the most meaningful aspect of my transformation wasn't the financial success or professional recognition, but the ripple effects that had emerged from learning to value my own work appropriately. By refusing to accept dismissal as definition, I'd developed the credibility and platform to help other women learn similar lessons. That evening, as James and I settled into our shared life in Denver while planning our eventual relocation to establish Harrison Technologies' global headquarters in London, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from a casual breakup, text to international entrepreneurship and meaningful partnership. Jake's text message had been intended as an ending, a dismissive conclusion to a relationship he'd found no longer useful for his professional advancement. Instead, it had become the catalyst for everything I'd built since then. Not because I'd sought revenge or tried to prove him wrong, but because I'd finally learned to stop seeking validation from people who weren't qualified to provide it. The last I'd heard through Denver's interconnected professional community, Jake was still working in marketing, still presenting borrowed concepts as original insights, still building his career on appropriated expertise rather than authentic innovation. His approach to professional development hadn't evolved, but his access to genuine innovation had ended when our relationship ended. Meanwhile, I'd built something that would endure long after individual relationships or personal drama had faded into historical irrelevance. Harrison Technologies was creating measurable value for businesses and customers worldwide. The Innovation Circle program was helping women develop authentic confidence and sustainable success. The partnership with James had demonstrated what became possible when both people valued each other's expertise appropriately. Most importantly, I'd learned that the best response to dismissal isn't anger or revenge. It's the quiet satisfaction that comes from building something so valuable that dismissal becomes impossible to sustain. Jake had underestimated me, assuming I was replaceable and forgettable. Time had proven that some people are irreplaceable precisely because they create rather than appropriate, build rather than borrow, and persist rather than abandon when the work becomes challenging. 3 years after receiving that 27-word text message, I was leading a global technology company, married to someone who understood and valued my expertise, and helping other women learn to advocate for their own professional worth. Jake's casual dismissal had been transformed into fuel for achievements he could never have imagined when he decided I wasn't worth a proper goodbye. The woman who'd been hurt by his text had been seeking external validation for internal worth. The woman reflecting on that journey had learned to generate validation through authentic achievement and meaningful contribution, making external recognition a pleasant bonus rather than a psychological necessity. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.